but people who know me might be wondering, painting, which is the subject of my presentation, clearly, where did that come from? I didn't originally intend to do my project on learning how to paint. I planned to do something in math. But as I was considering the options, I was reflecting on an experience I had in the 8th grade about 4 years ago. I was sort of in perhaps a similar phase to now, this kind of pivotal chapter moving forward. And I remembered in my aesthetics class doing a project on the artist Chanin. And for that I went to a retrospective that was up in the city at the time. And I remembered walking into that space and just feeling instantaneously and profoundly transformed. Seeing just the fire of his brushstrokes and the raw, visceral energy of his compositions, and really knowing more than I ever had the power that art has, the impact that it can have. So then, for about 4 years, I didn't really explore that again. And I decided this would be the great time, since I hadn't given myself the space to explore it, to really dive in and enter that world. So here we are. And the other thing I really wanted from this project, less than becoming a technical master, was to explore this without the burden of expectation or excellence, just to be able to do it to be rather than necessarily to be good. So that was my goal. You might want to keep that in mind as you're assessing some of what I made. All right, so the first thing I wanted to do was learn about figure drawing. My main goal was abstraction, ultimately, which was what sort of spurred me on this journey. This is a drawing of a chair. It's not totally perceptible. The legend next to it says nakedness secondhand, which seems very strange. I will explain the meaning of that infinitely, because the first thing that I did to develop a gestural vocabulary for painting was go nude figure drawing. So 0 to 100 immediately. So this was something I dove into. This was the first thing I did the day after May projects began. I went to the city, went to a 4-hour life drawing class. It was somewhat of a surreal experience. You walk into a room about this size, there's a person naked, and everyone goes and they just draw wordlessly. It's really a unique environment. What moved me about this experience, though, you can see 2 other drawings here, even more than the pursuit of form and trying to, capture this figure, was the vulnerability that I felt. I sort of didn't expect that. You think there's one person who's getting naked and then you're drawing her. But the way the room was oriented was such that everyone could see everyone else's work. So her body was exposed, but your body of work is exposed, and there was a sort of reciprocated vulnerability there that I didn't really expect, and that was almost a little bit staggering. And the epitome of that came at the end of the session, when the model came up and said, "Hey, I haven't seen you here before, can I see your sketchbook? Can I see your drawings?" And I thought, oh my god, no one told me this would happen. So I was terrified, obviously, that's what you know that. But I gave it to her, and she looked through, and she said, "These are really good for your first time. I hope you come back." And I thought, oh my god, that's wonderful. So I had that comfortability with myself sort of disrobing suddenly, not literally. And so I had that own taste of creative nakedness, shall we say, which was quite beautiful and an immediate lesson I took from this. So next I wanted to move into watercolor, so exploring color as well as just line and form. This wasn't a medium I had ever worked with seriously, and one thing that was really interesting about it is, since there's no white in watercolor, you're using the paper as white, which totally changes the way you think about composition. It's almost more sculptural, like you're working with marble and chipping away and leaving that to define form. So here you can see 2 different sort of perspectives on watercolor. This is using a pencil line to delineate form, and this is using the white of the page as sort of positive space. You're drawing it from the ambient background. Here are 2 more I did as I sort of got a little bit more comfortable. This is with charcoal, and this is, again, this sort of alternative technique using blank space. Here are 2 more I did once I was gaining a little bit of momentum. I like this detail here, and I later worked that into a painting, or an oil painting, I should say, so you may note some similarities. And then finally, this was one of the last ones I did, and it was one of my favorites. I think it might be rendered better up here than on this, because it's a little bit lightened. This one I thought represented a bit of a breakthrough in the development, because as you can see, there's this, which is a more analytical, still life sort of watercolor. And then there's abstraction. There's sort of a color field perspective, and there's a line that separates them. And this was the first watercolor I did where I felt like I wasn't just depicting the world in a sort of literal way. I was trying to go beyond that and show something, not just physical, but metaphysical, a different way of seeing that wasn't rooted in verisimilitude. And so I thought I accomplished that with this. a little glimmer of that. And so I called this limb from limb, not with a B, but with an N, which is a word for description or illustration, to show two different ways of fundamentally describing the world, the sort of physical and the abstracted. And then also it plays on limb from limb, which sort of implies that they're both parts of one greater body of experience and of sort of the cosmos. Okay, so after this, I went on to work with acrylic a little bit. First, I went to see the Degas show that was up at the MoMA, and this was really powerful. This is monotype. So you can see the way, almost like watercolor, you're using white to define form again. And these are some wonderful Degas monotypes. And this was important because my challenge for myself was to paint the most bustling, teeming, verdant, vibrant landscape I could find in only black and white. So to challenge myself there. The great part was that in addition to that challenge, I ended up forgetting the white. So that was another obstacle that I had to run with spontaneously. And so I decided to work around that by treating the acrylic almost like watercolor, using the page as white. And here's what I came up with. You can sort of see the similarities. And again, I think this represents, first of all, swooping through these obstacles without getting too particular, without falling back on this sort of perfectionism of, no, I can't continue without these certain materials, but embracing that spontaneity. And I think that was a valuable lesson to learn just personally. Okay, so now I was ready to begin oil painting. So here we have a picture of a blank canvas on the easel, as well as the still life that I endeavored to draw. So first I set out to make sort of a color map compositionally. You can see the overlapping triangles to get into it on a technical level. Then I did the underpainting, and this was great because this was my first exposure to working on something over a period of time, which had its own gravity to it. There's sort of that impulse once you've created your underlayer to stop because you've created something that's yours and it's precious and you can't continue. You have that fear of ruining it. And this was where my mentor / mom was very helpful in pushing me through that initial discomfort continuing versus letting something to rest immediately. So I kept going, obviously, and this is what I ended up with after my second time. And I have it there. Maybe I'll show it at the end. Yes, okay. So I want to finish up really quickly because we don't have that much time. There's a lot to say. For the next part of this, I did 2 studio visits with artists who are currently working. This is Laura Krutzky, she's a figurative painter in New York. And then I met with, And then I met with another painter whose studio I show a little bit later, Iris Revo, who's an abstract painter. What was important to me about those experiences is I saw these 2 artists with thoroughly different ways of working, with thoroughly different ambitions and intents. And what both of them echoed is you really make space for it yourself. And I thought that was so important with my goal of exploration. It's not really about comporting with a particular standard or a particular school or movement. It's really about blazing that as an individual. I thought that was very wonderful to hear from her. This is a brief underlayer, obviously not final, of a figurative painting I did of my dad, so you can see maybe some gestural vocabulary develop. Also, maybe you can see some resemblance. So for the last part of this, I knew that I wanted to do abstract to return to my main inspiration in this, which was that de Kooning show, and realizing just how incredibly viscerally powerful and emotive art can be. And I knew I wanted to do it from scratch. So this is stretching a canvas, using the raw linen, stapling it, putting it together. Which is an incredibly physical process. You're almost like wrestling with it, which I definitely did not expect, that just that level of physicality. And I grew incredibly attached to this canvas, more so than when you buy it. You see the work that goes into it. It also puts a different spin on the sort of minimalist compositions that are just a blank canvas. You have more appreciation for that when you see the canvas itself as a sculptural object. So then I visited that other painter's studio who I mentioned, and you can see how sort of messy this one is in comparison to the other women's studio. There's room for both, which was a wonderful takeaway. So really quick before I show my abstract work, just returning to some heroes. These are both the details, which I think is notable, that you can see really the artist's intent, and you can feel something just from this sort of one part of their painting, not even the whole composition. They're channeling this energy into every single brushstroke, and there's that fractal quality of their impact. You can see it, and this is Pollock, and this is de Kooning. So this was the first abstract I did, which is sort of a Jackson Pollock-inspired drip painting, which was definitely just sort of getting out my energy viscerally on the canvas. And then this is the second one I did, which has less of a limited palette. And this is not done. This is, I think, a second layer, and I'll continue working on it. But I thought it was incredibly fitting that I would finish with this one on my journey, sort of starting with figurative drawing and that sort of struggle to portray the world, and ending with the struggle to sort of transcend the world and summon something beyond its bounds, something that comes entirely from you, that's really an endogenous thing. And I think I definitely did learn a lot about myself throughout this process that is perhaps reflected in this canvas on some latent subconscious level, in terms of really freeing myself of expectation, of perfectionism, and just plunging into it as an immediate reality and savoring that. So these canvases, I mean, they're important, but they're not really what the project was about ultimately. Thank you very much. Yeah, sure, you can see the finished one if you want. So this is the, and it's on its side. Yeah, so you can see, and it's not a literal still life, right? If you go back to the color configuration of the first one, and that's because it was all white in the original picture, so I wanted to add some sort of dynamism, something for your eye to follow and whatnot. Yes, so that's that. That's still life. It's been drying for about 3 weeks, and it's still not fully dry, which is fun. Any questions? Sure.
Do you have a sense of what you felt you wanted to express? Like, what came out of you in this process?
In any particular painting, or just throughout the process as sort of...
Well, when you came to your final painting, what were you feeling and what did you want to express?
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful question. I don't necessarily think I came into it with a sort of crystallized, verbalized intention like that. I think as I was working through it, I would sort of find what it was, which is somewhat like this process itself, I think, of the main project. But I think that expressing perhaps the freedom that I had tasted throughout this entire process, and not feeling bound compositionally by form or by figure or anything, but really just sort of pure automatism in that way.
The watercolor that you did,
Yes.
Did you teach yourself, or did you go by somebody's studio or something, and did you just paint it at home?
Yeah, so these are all at home. These are just from, in terms of inspiration, I didn't visit anyone's studio for any of these, but I looked at some work by Cezanne and Klee, who are two sort of masters, heroes of the genre, to sort of look at how people were using space. And then the rest, I think, is just sort of a hands-on education. If you learn what works and you learn what doesn't work.
So I remember you originally wanted to do your project on something like math-based.
Yes.
Did you ever, throughout the process, like, because of, I mean, obviously painting uses some sort of sense of geometry, but did you, I know you work in, like, higher levels of math, really high levels of math? And did you, by chance, draw any parallels between, like, your, like, focus in math, or was it more, like, general, or how did that work?
That's a really good question. There's actually a specific example that I was thinking of as I was looking at other people's work and sort of considering my own, which is the E=mc² equation, not pure math, but physics. Perhaps you'll settle with me, which is this notion of matter as latent energy. And I'd obviously seen this written and read the derivation of it, but I had never felt it as viscerally and sort of primally as I had when I started looking at these abstract painters and doing it myself, because you see how you're taking physical paint, you're taking a paintbrush, and you're creating something that emanates its own energy from mass. So that to me was a very poetic, if non-rigorous, explanation of that truth in physics and mathematics, perhaps, by adjacency. So that's one thing, and there's a lot, but that's one that kind of stuck out to me, yes.
How did you go about deciding which styles to explore artistically? Was it sort of just like a pick and choose which ones were your favorite, or did they more like flow into each other once you
styles, that's a good question. I think that in terms of the styles I was looking at, some of it was on what was available, so the Degas show was up, so I figured, I'd see it and sort of take advantage of that opportunity. The abstraction stuff I was interested in from, several years back, and so that was kind of in my mind the entire time. As far as the style I developed, I think that sort of came about somewhat organically of kind of finding my gestural vocabulary and seeing what I could do. It was interesting with the first painter I visited, the figurative painter, she used the expression of sometimes the motion is just kind of in your muscles and you can't change it. So you're not necessarily emulating a style, but it arises, you know, as you kind of explore your mark making.
So first, I hope you recognize your finger painting experiences at the Kaplan School. And especially since like your whole class is in here. But I wonder if some of this was a thought of something you could use this opportunity to do before you dive deeply into some very sophisticated studies you're about to enter in school. And it might have been, I might as well do it now while I have the chance. And I'm wondering if that was the case, and I'm wondering if having done it, you might recognize that it might be something that you could continue to do that will open your mind a little bit and give you necessary respites occasionally and maybe even balance, recognizing physics. And
sure. Yeah, definitely. This was, I think that was my intention. I knew that I probably was not going to pursue this in depth in college, and so I figured I have 3 weeks without any really scholastic obligations or anything like that, and I can take that time to dive into this, something that I've always been interested in. That was definitely my original intent, but I think that after having gone through this process, it's not something that I want to discard readily, and I think it's something that even if I don't, continue painting with the same regularity as I did through these past 3 weeks, it's something that I will come back to, and it's something that I think will also just influence my way of thinking in terms of thinking about things visually and also being able to not be so obsessive over small details, but to just roll with it. Yes?
And on the math theme,
yeah, sure.
Any thought of maybe as you move on, I assume you're not retiring from this, doing more with perspective, because if you remember last year in European history, when we were looking at, for example, the School of Athens, and we were trying to show how they can do perspective that it looks like a photo. Any thought of using your math skills to try to tinker with perspective?
Yeah, I think that's really great. I think it sort of indicates that there's two perhaps, not necessarily applications, but proximities that math has to art. One, certainly in terms of the scientific aspects of analytical painting, and then also the sort of mathematical abstraction that subsumes abstract painting. And I definitely would love to explore the former if I had more time to develop technique, which is sort of, I think, the critical thing that you need for that. And 3 weeks might not be enough, but maybe in the future I can plunge into that as well. Yes.
And now that you have experienced several genres, any thought of doing the Bob Ross method of wet on wet?
Yes, there's some wet on wet, a little bit. Okay, from there, a little bit. No landscapes though, oil painting. So I guess I missed out on the chance to put that to the test.
Did you make any one style really abstract?
Style of painting?
I mean, you went through many different.
Yeah, sure. In terms of other people's work, I mean, I am generally attracted to that.
No, I mean, you were.
As my painting.
As an artist yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I really loved exploring watercolor, which I didn't expect. I sort of viewed it as this kind of purgatorial thing so I could get to oil, basically, admittedly. But I really enjoyed it. There's almost sort of a mystical quality in it because since you don't have white and you also don't have black, everything is defined through the whole color spectrum. And so, white and black are usually the colors you use to delineate form. So you have to really get creative and work around that. And there's sort of an ambient nature to it, but there's a latent power in that. I think it was very interesting. So I enjoyed that a lot. And I enjoyed playing with trying to be figurative, but also being gestural and kind of making it your own.
So in the end, do you think you went through your own little mini Darcy Renaissance?
Perhaps. Not in the sort of historical reference sense, but in maybe the most literal sense of the word, of definitely discovering this whole world of experimentation, and also discovering, within myself, the ability to explore these things and to emerge from them.
And after you win the Nobel Prize for Astrophysics, you can sell these.
That's something, yeah.
Your value will increase astronomically.
$2,000 now, if anything.
Wow.
Yeah.
Have you signed them?
No, I haven't signed them. Wow, that's a wonderful.
That was not finished.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Darcy, my grandmother used to keep going until she said she was finished. How do you determine when you're finished?
Oh, that's a really good question.
The gun.
that I will have more insight into in the future when more of my paintings are finished, since I'm still sort of in the throes of it. I think that it's sort of a subjective thing. Even if you're painting something figurative and you think that there's a metric for you being done, right? Does it look like it? I think there's something beyond that of looking at it and feeling like you've created your own world in this painting that means something real and that can evoke something when you're looking at it. Which is
Great job.